I'm Csan McNeil, a writer filmmaker. Welcome back to my vlog. Once again, I'm plugging in my third book, Every Sun Doesn't Rise, a collection of short African stories. So in my last video, I gave you snippets of the standalone story. I had mentioned before that some of the 9 stories are standalone and others link together. So check out my previous vlog for the stories that were standalone. And here in this vlog, I'll briefly cover the stories that are connected. So the first one is titled Hosanna. So Hosanna, we meet her as a child living in a village with essentially an evil grandmother who just doesn't like her. You'll find out why in the story. And so because of the abuse she has to go through, someone else who visits the village doesn't like it, so he pretty much adopts her because he couldn't understand why even the father, even though he's alive, he just doesn't do anything about the abuse. So he takes her to his house in Lagos. So his wife just had a baby, so she can essentially work for them. So in this story, it's based in Nigeria. It details a lot of what happens in Nigeria. So a lot of times you see most Nigerian households, especially like middle class, upper middle class, and rich, they always have a girl or two or more, or even a boy, pretty much working as a servant for them. So it's a trade by barter system whereby you're supposed to put them through school and treat them as your child and take care of them, and then in turn they essentially serve you for the rest of their lives almost. So in many stories there is tales of abuse, of these kids getting abused, or even heck, the kids causing havoc on the family they come into. But in this one it's nothing like that. Instead you see another kind of, I guess, suffering, just another kind of, because think about it this way, you're essentially, you're not called a slave, you're not called a servant, but you essentially are that. So even if the person isn't abusive, or even if they're the nicest person, you still essentially are spending your entire day, morning till night, in servitude. And it's not like a job that you're getting paid. You're getting paid by being put through school, you're getting paid by the food you're eating and having a place to stay, but essentially you're a slave. It's modern day, it's a kind of modern day slavery. And in this book I go into details about that. We follow the character as she pretty much grows up in this house and just navigating that world and the stresses of it until the end that she finds her way out of it. And yeah, the next linked story is Joanna. So at the end of Hosanna's story, she meets an older man, and that was her escape out of the house. So now we find out that she actually had 2 daughters for the man, and Joanna is the oldest one. And so in Joanna's story, we find out what happened after the fact to her mom, the dad, and just the lives they led. I'm not gonna mention any spoilers, but there is some tragedy involved, and essentially we follow Joanna and how she's navigating what's going on mentally and the stress of all that. And then by the end of Joanna's story, she essentially has to pretty much do what her mother did, of being kind of sold into another kind of slavery, like to serve another family. And yeah, but unlike her mom, she essentially she ends the story on a positive note, because Joanna, we established, she's very smart, she's very learned, she's always she doesn't, unlike some of the bad decisions we saw her mom make, she chooses not to make them. In fact, she chooses to embrace everything her mom went through and use that to navigate her own life so that she will come out better in the end. So it ends on a positive note. The next linked story is titled Salome. So Salome is the younger sister of Joanna. Hosanna had 2 children, Joanna and Salome. And so by the time we meet Salome, she's in her early 20s, and a lot has happened in her story. She's alone. Family is no more, and I won't go into detail why or how, but we just meet her alone. We meet her in her whole world. So she's quiet and tough and very stoic and strong. She's been on her own for years, so she is of the streets. She's very strong, and she knows how to just take care of herself. Then she meets an older guy, and even she at first thought, oh, maybe this would be like my story will end up like my mom's. Meet this guy and he'll help take me out of poverty. But that's not the case. She has a son for him, and things just unravel and devolve into, like, yeah. So the story doesn't end as a tragedy, But one thing I do with Salome's stories highlight a lot on mental illnesses, especially those linked to suffering and stress. Because on that thing with Africa, a lot of mental illnesses they go undiagnosed. In our culture here, we don't like admitting certain things, especially with mental illnesses. And then because we're very spiritual, we always just cover it with God. Someone is clearly mentally ill, they're like, no, there's nothing wrong with him, Jesus will heal them. We just have that mentality of either just not accepting it. They're like, no, there's nothing wrong with my child, there's nothing wrong, or just using God to butter it up and say there's nothing wrong, instead of actually acknowledging that there is a problem. And not even for children, for people, even themselves, deep down, if they analyze themselves, they'll know they had a problem, but they would never admit it. And that's just African culture. It's starting to change, but yeah, I highlight a lot of that in Salome's story. And yeah, I find ways to lay it out there that it's okay to acknowledge certain problems you have. Then the final story that links is the very last story of the book is titled J5. So through J5, we'll follow Salome's son. We meet him running away. We discover he had actually been living with his aunt Joanna, and at this point in the story, he can't find his mom, and I won't go into details why. But essentially, he's running away, and the story takes place on a travel vehicle titled, well, the car is called the J5, and I'll go into details in the story why, what is important about that, and also about certain things that take place in Nigeria. This story essentially highlights the fact that certain things happen in Nigeria that really shouldn't, things that are unavoidable, like accidents, for instance. Some of these things can be fixed by just little details, but the country just doesn't, and then bad things just keep happening, and for the longest time nobody ever just does anything about it. So it's one sad part of our culture. And so anyway, in J5, the bulk of the reason he's running away is that, just like his mom, and we'll see some of that in Salome's story, the mom was always she always believed in things outside of here. Like I said, with a lot of Africans, even, yes, they are superstitious, but I won't just end with superstition. We have a lot of spiritism in Africa. We have a lot of beliefs, a lot of things that we feel like we tap into. So J5 highlights that the most. He believes there are pathways to other worlds. He believes that there is a way on earth to access the spirit world, and that's what he's trying to find. He's trying to reconnect with his mom. And so on the bus, on the vehicle, he meets a girl, and they strike up a conversation, and she is not a believer, and she's trying to help him understand essentially that there is a thin line between mental health and spiritism. Somehow there is a link, and that's her point of view. But his point of view is that, no, I know what I have studied on this, I have done my research, and I know what I'm looking for. So there's that dichotomy in this story. There's a back and forth until the end of the book. Then we'll discover who was right. So yeah. But it's an interesting read. Not to toot my own horn, I really enjoyed it. I know I had mentioned that Mami Water had a lot of the scary elements, but this story too has a bit of that horror thriller vibe going on for it. So yeah, those are the 9 stories. I really hope you enjoy it. You enjoy reading it as much as I loved writing it. Like I had mentioned before, this book, 6 of the 9 stories, just came out of nowhere. I wrote them between June and July of last year. Like, once the muse was invoked, they just poured out of me, and I could not write them fast enough. And the other 3 that I had kind of written before, I honestly did page 1 rewrites. Like, last year was just a great year writing wise, and this is the product of that. I cannot say thank you to God enough, and I cannot say thank you to you guys for supporting me. Thanks to all of you that have bought the book. Like, I am so overwhelmed with love and joy for just how many people have actually bought the book, and also how many people that have actually read it, and then all the comments and the feedback. It makes me so happy. Like, makes me so happy. I believe, I mean, of course, your newest thing, you always feel like it's your best thing. Honestly, I feel like there's something about this story that just came from a part of me that I didn't even know existed, and I accessed things in me that I didn't even know were there. So far, honestly, I would say it's my best work yet, and Lord willing, it will only be uphill from here. So yeah, Please support me and please let me know if you're interested in the book. The price is on the screen. Please support me. Thank you and enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next vlog. Bye.